We are joined today by the amazing Andrea Shah, who is going to talk to you all about copy, the words on your website that do the selling. And I feel like they're often, we were just talking about this, they are often not paid as much attention to as they need to. And for that reason, we're not attracting the right people. We're not able to sell as easily as we would like. So with copy comes power, and Andrea is going to be sharing with us what that's all about, how you can be more persuasive with your copy. So Andrea, let's dig in. Tell us a little bit about you and your business, and then I'll let you take it away.
Sounds great. So I have been a copywriter for about 4 years now. Before that, I worked in-house at an agency where we dealt with a lot of the world's big brands. I did some brand voice, some SEO, everything that goes into a website. It was like a crash course in website making and fixing and optimizing. And then I came to copywriting a few years later, and I've started working with wedding pros in the past couple of years. I now regularly work with photographers, planners, DJs, florists, basically you name it. I've worked with someone to get website copy that gets them more leads. Oftentimes, there's different phases of your website copy that you'll go through. So you'll start a phase, we almost all do DIY it ourselves, just like we almost all DIY our first website, the design and that sort of thing. And then gradually, as your business evolves and you get a better understanding of your ideal client and what you want out of your business, you can start to make changes to your copy that will bring in more of those people, convert a higher percentage of them, and also just make you feel like you're showing up like yourself in your business, that you're really accurately representing your client experience. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
I'm so
So
excited for this. I cannot hype up copy enough. Seriously, like in my day to day in my business, the amount of time I am talking to people about how they need to be adjusting their copy because it is the thing that does convert leads. So really excited to dig into this.
yes, same here. Heidi, can you see my screen? Can you just
I sure
confirm for
can.
me? Okay, perfect. So I already gave you an intro about myself. I'm going to skip right over that. And I'm going to start talking first and foremost about my four favorite rules for writing persuasive website copy, because that's really what we're trying to do with your website is persuade people to take the next logical step, whether that is if you have a product-based website, it might be actually placing an order. If you are a wedding venue, it might be getting them to book a tour. For many of my clients, like a photographer or a florist, it's getting someone on a call to chat through what their plans are for their wedding. So we want to get your people to take the next step. And I'm going to share four rules that serve me really well. I still return back to these quite often when I'm writing copy for myself or my clients. And let's dig in. The very first rule I want to share with you, and this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say today. If there's anything I can have you take away from this presentation, it's this one: more you and less I, because your clients are the star of the show. You want them to feel like you're creating an experience and you're thinking about them. And we all fall into the temptation of thinking we have to showcase what's amazing about us, the experience that we have, the things that we know, our positioning, our expertise. And we all fall into the pattern of writing about ourselves using I, me, my. It's natural. I'm not here to criticize anyone, but clients get turned off by those words. Everyone's selfish. We all want to think about ourselves and not somebody else. So I'm encouraging you to reframe your copy in terms of what your ideal clients want and what your company can do for them. Whatever it is that you do uniquely well, whatever service you provide, you want to frame it in terms of what problem you're solving for them, what goal you're helping them achieve, what vision you're helping them achieve, and how you help them get there. Oops, I'm gonna slide back one. I will share one piece of advice that comes from a book a lot of you probably have read. And if not, I think it can be really helpful in terms of thinking about copy and storytelling. It's called Story Brand. And the piece of advice they share in there is that your client is going on a journey, but they are the hero of their own journey. They're the center, they're the main character, and you want to make them feel like the main character. You are the guide. You help them get to their final destination to achieve the things they want to achieve, but you are the guide. And I find that so helpful when I'm writing, thinking about how to frame copy, how to rewrite things. Often, as a copywriter myself, I notice that when I'm writing on behalf of my clients, I will use I in the first draft of a sentence or a paragraph. And then it's all about shifting back, taking a step back, and seeing how I can reframe the same copy in the same language by using I and talking about them, putting them at the center of it. And the same, I'm using I, by the way, but I really mean any first person language that you use. So that also could be we. So that's one of the main pieces of advice. It's like I said, this is my main takeaway, and it's a change that we can all make on our sites. We can all start reviewing our copy, looking for instances where we're talking about ourselves, especially on, say, the homepage, and then changing it back to you. So the second piece of advice I want to give is clear over clever. And as a copywriter, of course, I love clever, fun, jokey copy. I'm not going to say I don't. But the primary goal of your website is to be clear. And if your reader doesn't understand what you're saying, if you're getting a little too cute, chances are you'll lose them. And one thing I want to encourage you to think about as you are reviewing your own website copy, building your online brand presence, I spend a lot of time on forums targeted to couples who are getting married, and people are soliciting quotes and information from so many wedding creatives, so many venues, so many vendors. I just saw a Reddit post about someone with a very high photography budget, and I think she requested quotes from 30 people. And this is a person who had a planner later, so she didn't even request quotes from that many other vendors, but other people with other budgets, if they're requesting quotes for caterers, for venues, for florists, they might be getting 60, 70 quotes. So a lot of times they're making real snap judgments about websites. And if they can't get the information they need relatively quickly, they're going to move on. They just have a ton of tabs in their browser. They want to be able to understand what you're offering and understand it relatively easily. There's all kind of statistics out there. We all have just a few seconds to grab the attention of the person we want to talk to. So I really recommend being clear over clever. And then you can gradually finesse it. And I will say this applies a little bit more on your website. If you love to joke around a little bit and show your personality, that doesn't mean there isn't room for that. And I especially encourage that on social media where it's a little bit less, you're just trying to draw someone into your world, maybe get them to your website. But I always prize clarity first. Then the other thing that you can do, and this kind of allows you to integrate a little bit more fun into your copy, is to write for your two types of readers. So some clients are what we call skimmers. They're going to read your headlines, the price, they always read the price if you have it on there, and maybe the frequently asked questions. And based on that information and the visuals, the pictures they see of your work or your venue or your product, they're going to make a decision about whether they want to proceed. Other people will read literally every word on your page. And I know this because they will reference it to me. They will reference it to my clients. They will tell somebody, oh yeah, I read on your about page that your kid's favorite movie is Encanto. I'm looking at the Encanto Legos on a shelf over my head here. So I'm just kind of making something up. But they will reference a fact like that because they literally read everything. You don't know who's who unless you have a ton of traffic. It's really hard to figure out who your people are. So you want to write to accommodate both. You want to write headlines that describe what you're offering in a few words. So it's okay to have like little lines that say packages, for example, or that, say elopements, weddings, engagements, if you're describing different packages you offer. But at the same time, you also want a heading that does a little bit more. So I'm going to give you an example from a site I wrote for a client, and I don't know if you can't zoom in that well. So there is a headline that says packages. We've got that word there to catch their attention. And then the package is just called option A. But below that, in nice bold text, we have a little bit of a line about what's included in that package and what they're going to use it for. This one is for her brand photography shoots, but it's the same idea. We included a line that explains what it is a little bit more. It's still in her voice, like you can tell it's relaxed, it's casual, and sometimes they have a lot of fun with these, but at the same time, you're serving the person who's hitting that page down button fast and looking for key information. So you really do want to think about those two readers, it's something that my clients come to me a lot for help with because oftentimes it can be easy to read the bullet points and the paragraphs and that sort of thing. But they know that they also want to serve this person who is skimming through things quickly. Um, and so that's another way to accommodate those people. And then my fourth main rule here is to focus on one call to action. And call to action is a copywriter's term typically for the buttons or the links that you're using to get people to the next step of the process. So each step of your process, each page of your website should have one single goal, with the exception of the homepage. Typically on your homepage, you're going to encourage people to explore your site, to visit your about page, your portfolio, maybe to go to your contact page. But you really want to focus on one call to action. And I'm going to be clear when I say one call to action, I mean that you want to have one specific action that you want them to take. It does not mean that I only want you to have one button they can click on a given page. In fact, quite the opposite. We're putting more and more buttons on pages because a lot of times people aren't reading on a 2 foot wide desktop like I had here. They're reading on this. And so you want them to have a button pretty much after like every small section of your website so that they can click without having to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. So you also do want to think about mobile users. So when I say one call to action, maybe you want people to go to your inquiry form, or you want them to book a call or a visit, or you want them to download a brochure. Whatever the case may be, choose one goal for your page and then create multiple buttons that focus on that one goal. What we don't want to do is send them flying in all directions like spaghetti, essentially. We don't want them to be going to bouncing from one page to the next without a clear sense. And oftentimes we also can dilute the power of our call to action by suggesting multiple calls to action. So think really hard about what's important for them to do. If you don't want to talk to anyone until they've downloaded a brochure and looked at your pricing, then make sure that download comes first. If on the flip side, you prefer to talk to people, drive them to the call, get them to book that call. But we want really a laser focus on one call to action on each page of your website. It's something that as writers, we also have to remind ourselves to do fairly often, but we want to focus on that one item, that one action we want them to take. So from here, I want to go into some other ways to enhance your website copy and your client experience. I'm going to pause here and talk a little bit about client experience because I think it's so important. A lot of times, the first interaction someone's having with your brand and with your business is on your website. And so it really is a key starting point for your client experience. It sets the tone for what a lot of the rest of your experience is going to be. I know that some of you, your funnel might be that they interact with you through ads or simply organically through social media, and then they come to your website. But in general, people see those things as ads, they see them as social media. The client experience, they really expect your website to be like your online office. So think about if you were to create an actual physical location for yourself, how would you want it to feel? What experience would you want people to have? That's the same experience I want them to have on your website, and your copy needs to reflect that. So there's a couple examples of ways that you can enhance your website copy and your client experience. There's three categories I want to call your attention to. One is we're going to talk a little bit about client reviews, what to do with them, why they're so important, and how we use them as copywriters. One is sensory language. And then the third is kind of nebulous, but it's anticipating your client's needs, figuring out what questions they're going to ask before they even formulate them and answering them so that you build that trust and that sense of you as an expert. So let's start with client reviews. And like I said, they're a copywriter's favorite tool. If you hire me to write your website, one of the first things I'm going to do is read every review I can get my hands on Google, on Wedding Wire. I'll ask you to email your clients and have them answer some questions because your copy doesn't just reflect the way you talk. You want it to reflect the way your clients think and they talk and they make decisions. And sometimes that's totally different from the way we think and talk and make decisions as business owners. But we get kind of in the weeds with our own business and we have trouble seeing it from the perspective of a client. And this is true whether you're new to business or you've been in business for years and years, it can be challenging to step back and get this perspective on how your clients are thinking. And I especially want to say it's changing so much now. People are changing how they make buying decisions and how they approach their priorities. After COVID, I'm seeing a trend in like luxurious micro weddings. I'm seeing different buying timeframes. There's a lot going on, and your client reviews are like your way to tap into what people are thinking in the marketplace now. So I have here in my notes, your reviews are a gold mine. You really want to get the language that your people use to talk about their problems or their concerns. And when we're talking about problems or concerns for the wedding industry, I'm always a little cautious about using that language because sometimes people genuinely do come to you with a problem to solve. Other times, they simply know that they want your product or your offer and they don't see it so much as a problem as they do just something that they need a solution to. So I don't always encourage thinking about it like a problem, but sometimes it is. Sometimes someone's facing the problem of they have 400 guests in their unlimited venues in their city and they really need someone to help with it. Sometimes it's more like, hey, I need a wedding dress. I'm going to buy a wedding dress. Am I going to buy a wedding dress from you? But you want to reflect the language that they're using to talk about their experience. I also find that when I'm going through reviews in depth, they often highlight aspects of client experience or your personality or your product that you yourself don't tell me about. So my clients fill out a questionnaire and we sit down for a talk. And they know their businesses really well, but still, oftentimes their reviews will call to attention something that my client themselves didn't tell me, but is incredibly valuable. For example, I'm writing a site for a wedding photographer this week, and multiple clients in their reviews called attention to the fact that she's really good at creating a private moment for them during their wedding day, and she photographs it, but she also just finds a way to get them a few minutes to themselves. It makes for good photos, but it's also just a breather from the chaos of their wedding day. And several people called this out specifically. And I'm sure if she really thought through her process, she might be able to tell me it's something that she does, but it didn't come to her mind as quickly as something it was for her clients where it was really noteworthy. So that's why I'm really encouraging you to read your reviews. If you are not asking for reviews on a regular basis, I encourage you to do so to add a feedback form or a testimonial request to your process. So how do you use them besides just learning what language, what words and phrases your clients are using, and then incorporating them into your copy? Um, and I often use a spreadsheet. Like I'll pull really great testimonials, and first I just copy and paste, and then I start highlighting words and phrases that really stick out to me that I want to be in the future copy. But another suggestion is to use your testimonials on your site, your client reviews on your site. Try not to put them all on a single page. I know that's a common error that people make when structuring their website. But what happens is if a client goes to read your reviews page, that's phenomenal. If they don't go to read the reviews page, they might miss out on the incredible things your clients say about your business. So when I'm working with someone to build their website, I encourage them to put 1 to 2 testimonials on almost every page that they create so that they can ensure that someone who scrolls through their homepage or who scrolls through their services page is going to see an example of a really good testimonial. That being said, one thing that I want to encourage you to do is to choose your testimonials carefully, make sure they're recent, make sure they're relevant so that they are talking about the experiences and the services you still offer, or that they talk about your personality, and edit them down to a few sentences at most. And I know this can be a little bit complicated and confusing because we don't want to change dramatically the wording of a testimonial that someone gives us. Typically, what I do is simply remove sentences here and there that don't change the meaning or the tone, but still, a lot of times clients repeat themselves. You know, they're writing a Google review on their phone after grabbing a snack before they go pick their kid up from school, and they write it in a hurry and they repeat themselves 2 or 3 times. So I recommend editing them down. You can edit them. Sometimes I'll do like one bold pull quote that I really want to call attention to, and then 2 or 3 more sentences below it. Sometimes I'll do just one really good sentence or even a handful of words. Sometimes someone comes up with 5 or 6 punchy words that really get to the heart of what your business is about. And it's okay to use them like that. If you feel like you have to edit them a little bit for grammar and, just coherence, that's totally fine. Usually what I recommend doing in that case is just going back to your client for their approval and getting them to give you a thumbs up, and most of them will be fine with it. But I do recommend not posting 300 or 400 words just because that's what someone wrote originally. Your reader will lose attention. Instead, you really want to go for the punchiest, most interesting part of what they say. The other piece of advice I want to give about this is that templates, if you buy a show it template or a WordPress template, often use carousels for testimonials where multiple testimonials will kind of rotate through. And it's a way to fit more on there, but it can also cause really good, interesting testimonials to go missing if someone doesn't click through all the way. So I recommend trying to find a layout that allows you to just display multiple testimonials on your page. And your designer, if you work with a web designer, they can also help you do that. If you're a product-based business, you may already be using a tool that allows you to just simply display a link to reviews of a given item or a set of reviews, and that's fine too. But again, even if you're using a tool that automatically emails people for reviews and collects reviews with very little effort on your part, still really take the time to read through the reviews you get on Google and the product reviews and find the language that people are using. Make a list of words your clients use and incorporate those in your copy.
I have a couple questions here for you about client reviews. Uh,
Perfect.
Peter and Allison said, we're a bridal boutique. Any thought about video testimonials? We have several immediately after the appointment where the customer said yes to her dress.
I absolutely love it. I think most of us would tell you, video can add SEO value to your website for one. For another, people love seeing, I'm not in the market for a wedding dress and I haven't been for a long time, but people love seeing fun videos, celebratory videos like that. So if you have video testimonials, I would say that's a great thing to put it on your homepage or put it on a page about the experience of shopping at your boutique. Try not to do too many, but definitely a video testimonial is great. You're lucky to have them.
Yeah, and Mark says here, be sure to add captions and keep in mind, like
Yeah,
you could absolutely pull out something that that person says during the video and use it as a text testimonial somewhere else. So you could kind
absolutely.
of
Yeah.
get, multiple uses out of that one video.
Yes, get as much mileage as you can. And I'm talking about your website because that's my area of expertise, but make sure these really nice testimonials you gather also go on social media because they can do double duty there.
Fabulous. Amanda asked here, I market for 3 venues, one of which is under construction and thus doesn't have reviews yet. What would you suggest for a newer venue? Would you use reviews from older venues to show the ability of the team?
Yes, that's exactly the sort of thing I do. Whatever through line there's going to be from the older venues to the new venues, that's what you want to pursue, or that I don't want to say older venues, but existing venues. Talk about the team, anything you can get about the experience that people created that's not necessarily location specific, but reviewers will often talk about, especially for a venue, they'll talk about the competence of the team. They'll talk about how you went above and beyond. They'll talk about your process in the lead up to the wedding. And so all of that will still count. And yeah, I would just highlight that it's the same team from before, and that you have experience. That's another thing that, you know, um, the first wedding venue can't be easy to run. There's a learning curve, but when you're on number three, that's an asset for you. And that's something that you can continue to highlight. And you can just simply say clients at our other venues have said and include those testimonials.
Yeah, and I would think even positioning it copy-wise is like a new venue from kind of like you see with movies, like the people who brought you
Yes,
Jurassic Park.
from the creators of,
Yeah.
and then, yes, exactly. And I think um, experience matters a lot there. I think one thing you can do is the counterpoint is yes, you don't have the new reviews, but on the flip side, you have experience from running other venues and you're pouring that in. And especially if you're developing, and I'm going a little off piece here, but if you're developing like a purpose built venue, one thing you can really highlight is you've learned from the other 2 venues about what makes a venue work for vendors and for clients, and you're pouring all of that experience into creating this new one.
That's That is, I would be excited to read that. Like, oh, okay, they created that exact thing that they learned that they needed. I love
Yes, and if
that.
you can tell, like, photographers that you created a venue with them in mind, and good lighting and that sort of thing. That's one thing, I didn't mention throughout here, but depending on what your line of business is, we all always think of our ideal clients as couples or people getting married, but you do have other decision makers in there as well who are gonna look at your website. You have planners. If you're not a planner, you're going to have planners looking at your website. You may have other creative partners, someone who's just looking, like a photographer who's looking for a videographer to recommend. You have parents and friends who are helping make decisions. And then, depending on how you're positioning yourself in the industry, you may also have industry gatekeepers or experts who are looking at your website as they make a decision to include you as a speaker or highlight your brand in some way. Maybe you've applied for publication. So you do want to bear all those people in mind too. At the end of the day, it is for 99% of businesses, it is mostly focused on the couple, but you can keep those people in mind too in the back of your head.
Thank you. That's helpful. That covers all the questions we have right now. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to something that I find that a lot of wedding professionals could use more to their advantage in their website copy, but people tend to avoid, and that's sensory language, which is a very fancy way of talking about the five senses and really evoking them in your copy. Because at the end of the day, most weddings are an experience that involves all five senses. There's taste, there's touch, there's sound, there's sight, and there's smell to some extent. And when we evoke these five senses, we can really help our clients picture themselves on their wedding day, imagine themselves in the position of working with you, and it's also sensory language is really powerful. It activates the areas of our brain related to those specific senses and can kind of help us latch onto information and remember it more. So I really want you to think about the different senses when you're writing your copy, especially those senses that may not be the default for your line of business. So if you're a caterer, you probably talk about taste. I should hope you're talking about how good your food tastes. But what about aromas? What about talking about the sight of a beautifully arranged plate? I attended a great presentation at Wedding MBA last year from a caterer, and she spoke not just about the taste, but also about the importance of presentation and talking about presentation and highlighting that beautiful plate that lands in front of someone. So you want to invoke the senses that aren't necessarily, I don't want to say logical, but not the default for your line of business too. With wedding dresses, you might talk about the sight of them. That's very normal. But you can also think about the rustle of the fabric or the feel of the fabric, the heaviness of a dress or the lightness of a dress. All of these things can really help people envision themselves in a specific place. It creates these memories and it helps you stand out a little bit. It's a strategy that I don't hear as many people using. And I think it's a really powerful tool. Weddings are like I said, they're such a sensory experience. It's just a way to enrich the copy a little bit and to paint that picture for them. And ultimately, what you want them to be doing as they're reading your site is thinking, okay, if I work with this business, here's the experience I'm going to have, and to have this complete, well-rounded picture of it in their head. So the last item I want to talk about here, the last way to enhance your copy, is by anticipating questions. And I like to think of this as the best way to prevent ghosting. And I have been privy to a lot of discussions in the industry recently about ghosting because it seems like it's on the rise. And everyone wants to know what they can do to prevent it. And first of all, I am not promising a magic trick. We cannot completely get rid of ghosting. Remember how earlier I talked about how many vendors people are contacting these days? There's going to be some ghosting. We simply have inquired with too many people to respond. But oftentimes, ghosting is a result of not getting information they need on your website and then disappearing as soon as they have the information because they realize that you're not a fit for them. And I saw a really great post from a woman. She's a photographer and a copywriter. She had a great post this week. Her name's Rachel, and she runs a business called Green Cheer Stories. And she pointed out that it's really difficult for people to say the words, "This is too expensive for me." And oftentimes ghosting is about that, but it's embarrassing for people to say it, even though there's nothing wrong with that. I can't afford to hire certain wedding photographers for my wedding. I'm not a billionaire. But it can be just a little twinge of humiliation for people to say that. So when you don't have pricing and they find that they're reaching out to you and they get this price, it's a big surprise, their eyebrows go up, and they ghost a little bit. So one of the questions people are asking is, how much does it cost? And when I spend time in wedding forums over and over again at virtually all price points, people are interested in how much it costs. So that's not a bullet point on here, but it is one of the things that people are going to be asking. And I have on here, think about what you're most commonly asked once a client takes the next step, whether it's a sales call, a further request for information, a visit to your salon, a visit to your boutique, a visit to your venue. And one of the questions people have, the question in their head is pricing. They're all thinking about pricing. So that's one way you can prevent ghosting. But there are probably other questions too besides pricing. Price isn't the only thing. I'm going to go back to my wedding planning experience a little bit here. My partner's family is all vegetarian for religious reasons. And when I was looking for a caterer, one of the hardest things for me to find, and one of the things that often caused me to opt out of working from with someone, was whether or not they offered a vegetarian catering option, whether or not we'd have to work really hard to get something, or it was just something they did regularly. And that was 10 plus years ago, so people's websites were not as robust as they are now. But a simple frequently asked question could have saved me from inquiring with people who weren't going to be a fit. And it would have saved them time on their end too, because nobody wants to get a lead in their inbox that they get super excited about, only to learn that they're not a match for you. And that could have been easily avoided by giving them a key piece of information early on. So, one of my recommendations is to add a frequently asked questions page, either to your services page or on a separate page entirely. You can do both also. Um, it really depends on how many questions you have. I work with one client who does elopement photography. I think we have like 20 questions, literally 20 questions on her frequently asked questions page. So we've made it a separate page. Nobody needs to be expanding 20 questions. But some of my other clients have 4 or 5 and they just include them on their main services page. Skimmers love it, close readers love it. And you can kind of make them expandable in your website design so you have that information, but it's not overwhelming. I also really encourage you to think about the questions people are asking and assume your website is the first step in your process. So you do get to drip information out in calls, proposals, even contracts are going to be where you really have the finest details laid out. But your website does not need to include every single bullet point that's in your contract. And I talk about that a lot with my clients. It's a really tricky thing to balance the right amount of information because you want to be anticipating those questions. You want to be the person who says, you know what, I know that a person in your shoes is going to ask this. Here's the answer. At the same time, clients don't need to know on the first interaction. This is the example I always revert to. The square footage of the dance floor is probably not going to be a deal breaker for them the very first time. That's something that can be shared later on in a proposal. But what they do want to know is, do you have a dance floor? What time does the building close? Are we going to have to be out of the building at 9 p.m.? That sort of thing. So you need to think about what they're asking and when, and carefully decide when you want to drip out that information. Not everything has to go on your website. At the same time, if there's a question you get asked every time someone comes in to visit your venue or your boutique, think about getting that up there on the website. This is not a promise that everyone will read it. We cannot guarantee that, no matter how hard we try. I know that that's one of the things people vent about the most, and it's totally legitimate. But some people will read it. One thing that's useful to think about when you think about website copy is that it is not designed just to bring more people into your business. It is designed to bring more aligned clients into your business, clients who are actually going to spend money with you, clients who are actually going to be a pleasure for you to work with, especially if your process of working with them is not one single transaction, but an extended planning process. You want people who make you happy and who can afford the rates that you charge. And so, as I'm talking through this whole presentation, what I want you to think about is, are you serving the clients that are going to make you happy, that are going to make your business easier to run, that are not just price shopping you. What information do they need to have to feel comfortable taking the next step with you? And what information can you provide that's going to be like a little bit of a turnoff for the people who aren't a perfect match for you? I hate to use the word repel because it sounds so mean. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't have the budget to work with you or you're simply not a good fit, you both deserve to know that fairly on in the process. Going back to the example I used earlier of a caterer, um, say you need kosher catering. It doesn't do you any good and it doesn't do a business owner any good to inquire about kosher catering when they don't have it and they could have easily said it. It's energy spent on both sides, their energy inquiring, your energy responding. So things like that, you can simply clarify from the very beginning to make sure that those people who might be wonderful clients in all other regards aren't going to be spending their time inquiring with you because you are also preserving their energy. And if you're responding to tons of leads that aren't a good fit for you, that's time you could be spending doing other tasks. So your copy is a real tool to share information that's going to help people decide if you're the right fit for them or not. So the last thing I want to talk about is returning to the idea that your website really is the start of your client experience and your copy needs to reflect how your brand shows up online. And again, I spend a lot of time on Instagram, on Reddit, on Facebook, other forums, reading what couples are saying, whether they're couples with a relatively tight budget or couples who are spending six figures plus on their wedding. And what's interesting is that a lot of what they care about is the same regardless of their budget. They are interested in a lot of the same things. And the first thing, number one, is that they do judge website content and your website presentation based on how accurate it is, especially for vendors like planners, maybe wedding venues. If you need to be detail oriented, they are judging your copy on whether it is detail oriented. If there are errors, if stuff is repeated, if there are factual issues, they're wondering, are you going to take care of all the little details when it comes to their wedding? So it is worth having someone read through your copy, ask someone who's not in your line of work just to read through your copy and give it a quick proofread because they do care about this sort of thing. Another thing is to make sure your online presence matches the vibe of your in-person offering. I was recently on a podcast with Candace Coppola, and she referred to this as catfishing people. You don't want your website to present you one way and then show up and you're totally different. Like, you don't want to, if you're a person with green hair and tattoos and a punk rock vibe, you don't want to make yourself look like the very stodgy planner from Bride Wars on your website and then show up the way you actually are on your wedding day. And vice versa. If you're super formal, you don't need to present yourself as anything other than taking a formal approach because there are clients for both people, but your website copy needs to be consistent with your client experience and with the way you show up. And so a lot of times you need to evaluate everything through the lens of, is this how I talk? Is this how I approach my business? How can I adjust the copy that I create so that it matches who I am as a person and how I show up on a day-to-day basis in my business? The next thing I want to say, and scroll down, there we go, is your clients, like I said, your clients may be viewing a dozen vendors in the same category as you. So number three is, do they have enough information to take the next step? And generally speaking, they want to make sure they have an understanding of your services. And oftentimes they want to make sure they have an understanding of your prices to some extent. I'm not telling anyone that they need to have specific packages with one fixed price on their website. But oftentimes, one of the things that turns people away, and I have read countless posts about it, is that they don't have any sense of pricing. And oftentimes, people's default assumption is if they don't see your pricing, they don't have any understanding of what it is. And they think it's like the old thing where you flip to the back of Vogue magazine to see where an outfit came from and it said price upon request. And you're immediately like, well, that's not for me. If the price is upon request, it's too rich for my blood. And for a lot of people, they feel exactly like that. It might not be the case. They might be able to hire you, but if they have no sense of how much you cost, there's a chance they're not going to move ahead with their inquiry. So you want to make sure that they have enough information to take the next step, that they have what they need. And maybe you want to talk to other people in your area, or potential clients themselves, or clients that you've worked with in the past, and ask them how they feel about that. Was it really vital for them to do some kind of pricing? What other information was really important for them to view? The one tricky piece that an inquiry is essentially looking to confirm is always availability. And typically, I think it's really hard to display anything more than general availability on your website. But you want to make sure they understand what they're going to get if they work with you, and maybe an idea of how much it costs. And so the next step is also just to make sure your offers are clear, to provide some guidance perhaps on how much things cost, and then what next step they should take. What is the logical next step if they want to work with you? Do they want to book a call? Do they want to get a spot on your calendar for an in-person tour? Can they just come to your bridal shop if that's what you own and show up? Or do they need to make a reservation? But they should be really clear on what next step they should take, so that there's no conflict of interest and they can just simply move forward. In marketing, we call it friction. You don't want to create friction for your clients. You don't want to cause any little snags that might slow them down in the process of taking that next step towards working with you and paying money for your services or your products. You want to make it as seamless and as easy as possible to get them there, because we get distracted, we get hung up on small details. And how many of us have gone shopping online, found something we really, really like, and then either got distracted by a button that doesn't work or something else that pops up, and we just don't complete the purchase even though we liked it. Your clients are the same way. They have a million things going on around them. They want to make sure your website works. They want to make sure it's smooth and easy. So those are the things. Come back to this if you're looking to revise your website copy. Two other pieces of advice that are a little bit more on the practical side, not theoretical, when it comes to your website copy. One is, once you've been writing for a while and you've got a draft of what you like, show it to a couple friends outside the industry. Show it to someone, maybe you don't know someone who's exactly your target client, but show it to someone who has at least an idea of what you're trying to achieve and can give you a new perspective on it, because oftentimes we stare at the same words and they become wallpaper to us, and we're not able to see where there's maybe a missing piece of logic or a better word that we could have used. So share it with somebody else and get their opinion on it. There's actually also like a psychological effect where once we're experts in our industry, we kind of assume that everyone else is an expert too, and we forget how much we know, and so we just assume, hey, everyone else knows the same amount as me, but that's totally not true. And I see it increasingly. There's one particular vendor category where I see a huge gap between what vendors know and what clients know, and that's floristry. It's a good example to take is, lately people just don't know what flowers cost. They don't know that there's labor involved. They don't know that there's materials involved. They have no idea what flowers are vital in season versus which ones you're going to have to order from Colombia and that sort of thing. They don't know any of that. And so they look at a pretty display on Instagram and they want it without any concept of how much it's going to cost. And you, as the florist, immediately say, oh, well, that's going to cost $50,000. And here's all the reasons why. But they don't know. You're the expert, but you forget that they don't have all this information and these years of experience. So that's another place where a person who is not you can come in and say, okay, but that's not going to be completely evident to a newcomer here. And then the other piece of advice, which is really simple, but a good way to just make sure you like your copy, make sure you feel comfortable with it, detect a few errors here and there, is to reread it through in a different font. I know it sounds silly, but it really makes you look at things differently. And also try reading it aloud. And if you're reading aloud and you see that there's a sentence that you would never actually say in real life, that it sounds awkward when you say it out loud, try rephrasing it to make it sound more like you. I know in Microsoft Word and possibly in Google Docs too, there's also like an AI robot voice that can read your copy aloud to you even. So you don't even have to sit there and wear out your voice. You can literally just press a button and it will read it aloud to you. And it's a great way to capture something that's a little confusing or awkward and just shift that a little bit. Because like I said, I stare at Word documents all day. And after a while of staring at the same document, It's really hard to see it with fresh eyes. So those are just a couple ways to get a fresh pair of eyes on your copy before you hit publish. And that
That
is
is
it for
super
me. So
helpful.
Heidi, I don't know if we have a few more questions or
Yeah, if you guys have questions, definitely drop them in the chat. Teresa asked, what sort of sensory language could you use as a wedding coordinator?
so I have written for wedding coordinators before, and I actually think you have like the full array here. One thing I like to think about is everyone wants that gasp worthy moment, right? When you're coordinating this wedding, you pull together this, especially the reception experience. And your couple and then their friends and family, they walk in and they gasp because you've done such a great job. Might be a little bit of a cliche, but here it is. What are they experiencing in that moment? Is it the scent of the flowers? Is it the sound of the music? Maybe you have a string quartet. Is it kind of the buzz of anticipation, the voice of the different people trickling in? Is it the flavor of a cocktail? What are they experiencing in that moment, and how can you bring that in? For a wedding coordinator, I think that that's really important. And the other thing you can talk about is a little bit of the getting ready experience too. If you're helping them have a relaxed getting ready, where they're not running around stressing out about things going on. What are they doing in that moment? What does it look like for each member of the wedding party and each half of the couple as they're getting ready? What are they experiencing in those moments?
I like that way of thinking of it as different kind of like snapshots of the day at different phases of that. What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that smell like? And going through the senses that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a ton of them. Breaking it down on the dance floor at the end of the night is another one. Like we could all find several of them. But that, especially for coordinators, I feel like that big reveal where people walk into their reception, like, of course, the ceremony venue is important. I'm not here to say it's not, but so much of what you do is dedicated to creating that immaculate reception experience.
Charlene asked, what are your thoughts on balancing personalized brand accurate copy with SEO?
Oh, my favorite topic. This is like a whole other presentation. So I definitely think it is possible. I do it for my clients. I think that actually Google has fine-tuned things so much that they're not looking, SEO copy is not what it was 5 or 10 years ago, where people were really cramming keywords in and awkward keywords. If you use your keyword in your meta title, meta description, your H1, and then once or twice in the body of your page, that's going to be enough. That's going to be fine. And you're totally able to do that. So one of my little cheats, and I'm like giving away my best trick here, is I often have the actual H1 tag on a smaller piece of text that contains the keyword. So it's not the actual intriguing headline, because a lot of times it's really hard if your keyword is, I don't know, Denver wedding venue. It's hard to write a compelling headline that makes people want to read more that says Denver wedding venue in there. So we put Denver wedding venue inside those little tags and then write a catchy headline that talks about what kind of wedding venue you are without that awkward keyword. And that's one of the things that's worked best for me and my clients. And I've worked also a little bit with Sarah does SEO on some projects, and we really like that technique between the two of us. It's like, and if we're agreeing on it, it's like, not that we disagree often, but it really clicks because I'm a little bit more style. She's a little bit more SEO focused. But I do think it should not be, there's no need to keyword cram, and you should be able to write with personality. One thing I do to help me with SEO keywords is obviously you choose one keyword to target, but then it's also about just weaving in other keywords you want on the page. And so I'll make a little list of the things I want to mention on each page at the top of the page. And sometimes it's as simple as a location or two, maybe that someone is LGBTQ inclusive, or that they do wedding coordination in addition to full on wedding management. Whatever the case is, I make a little list of those keywords and I just weave them in as they go. But if I'm being honest, I write pretty freely and still have success with SEO. I'm not adhering too much to like a very strict SEO focused layout where we really repeat the keywords over and over.
Yeah, I love that they've gotten so much better at being able to digest the content and figure out what you're talking about, what you're trying to
Yeah.
get across. So it's less of like having to, cram awkward keywords in and shoehorn them in.
Yes, and actually, I will say, jumping off of that, the other thing they've gotten so much better about is location-based, knowing where you are without you having to list 50 different locations on, like, your homepage. If you remember 10 years ago, everyone had a little blurb on the bottom of their page that was like, "We plan weddings in Boca Raton and Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale," and they would list 12 cities. Now you don't need to do that because if you have your profile set up and linked to your website, they will do that work for you and you don't have to worry so much about it.
Peter and Allison asked, any thoughts on how regularly you should review and update your copy? That's a good question.
That is a good question. I would say you don't need to make major updates. I'm not going to tell you to go in every 2 weeks or a month. I would say read through things, be better than me about my own website and read through things quarterly to make sure at least pricing and dates and availability are accurate. But I think a lot of people find that it's a useful exercise to really go in and adjust a little bit more during their slow season. And if you are updating your copy once a year during your slow season, if you sit down and give yourself a week, assuming you have a slow season, because I know not all wedding businesses are seasonal, but if you do have a slow season, sit down and give yourself some time and really make sure that everything still applies to you. More frequently than that, you just want to check and make sure that, like, if you have a little blurb on your about or your contact page that says you're now booking for 2024, by the time November rolls around, you want to have that updated to say you're taking bookings for 2025 and 2026. But most of the time, I think most people would serve themselves well to do like a thorough review once a year.
Yeah, and I mean, something that I do for myself in going through this is looking at, okay, like who were those great clients whose reviews I need to pull those things out
Mhm.
of. Maybe I need to reframe the way I'm talking about this particular kind of thing to focus more on, what they called out. Like you said, sometimes we don't call out the things that really matter to our people as clearly as we should. So it's a really good opportunity to hone in on those pieces.
Yeah, and another example of that that I think is really beneficial is if you display on your homepage or any other page of your site some links to blog posts, especially if you're blogging real weddings, make sure you're updating those once or twice a year too. You don't want to get to the point where you're highlighting two weddings on your homepage and they're from 2019 or 2020. You want to have those be recent and relevant to the types of clients you want. The only exception I'll give is like if you had a super celebrity and you want their wedding highlighted on your homepage for the rest of eternity, then like that's amazing and do it. But most of the time, those highlighted blog posts should be updated once or twice a year too, just to make sure that I'm not a law of attraction person or anything, but what you're putting on your homepage is what you're going to attract into your business. And you want to make sure that you're showing the kind of work that you want more of.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind because I get questions sometimes about that. Like, okay, I took this not so ideal wedding. Do I include it in the portfolio? Do I show it on the website? And you want to have that filter, really, that you're thinking through everything you're adding, everything that you're refining to make sure it's like that perfect little microcosm of the person you want to attract.
I used your own language about it, Heidi, when talking to people that you want to clone. You want to think about the people that you want to clone, and you
Yeah,
want to create your website with that kind of content. Like you had a wedding that you would take 10 more of, that's the one that should be on your homepage.
absolutely. And that's an easy way to think about it too. Easy way to make those decisions when you have like a ton that you're looking at and you're trying to decide, what am I using?
Yes.
Do we have any other questions for Andrea? And Andrea, if people want to learn more from you, work with you, how is the best way to get in contact with you?
I've got a slide here. I hope it's showing with my website. And
Still
also,
have your, oh, there we go.
yeah. And you'll also find me semi-regularly, not as often as I should be, on Instagram. That's where I'm mostly online, talking about copy and website strategy and all of that good stuff. So please come find me, drop into my DMs if you have any questions. I'm always happy to talk about all of this with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this. We can give people another minute if you have any questions here. Mark says this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been really helpful. I think it's given people a lot to think about, and not just to think about, like a lot you can actually go and take action on, which is the important thing here. We don't want to just be like, oh, yeah, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. It's so much easier to take like those small, digestible steps when you have this kind of focus.
Yeah, and I would say, like I said, if there's two things you can do, it's make sure that your testimonials on your site are updated and make sure you're using more you focused language. Those two things alone can make a big difference.
Yeah. Amanda says, thank you so much. This has been extremely helpful. Heading over to IG right now to follow you. Yeah, if you guys have any
Yeah.
questions at all, feel free to shoot Andrea a DM, shoot her an email. I know she's about to go on vacation, but she'll
Yeah.
definitely get
Yes.
back
You
to
will
you.
see photos of vacation, but yes, then I will be back in the office in a week and a half. So yes.
Fabulous. Well, I don't think we have anything else here, so I will wrap this up. Guys, if any questions arise, feel free to reach out to Andrea. She's clearly super knowledgeable on this sort of thing and writes for a lot of different wedding businesses. So if you decide, yeah, I'd rather just work with someone on this and not have to write it myself. I know a lot of people personally hate writing. Andrea's always the person that I send people to, so I would highly
Thank
recommend
you.
reaching out to her.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from any of you guys. Someone
Well,
be the
thank you
feather in
so
my
much.
cap. I'm looking for a baker this year. So if there's any bakers out there, I mean, I love to work with anyone, but the feather in my cap I'm looking for is a wedding cake baker, and maybe just because I'm obsessed with cake.
I'm trying to
So
like collect them all of the different ones.
I still have some. I just learned about the other day wedding poets, people who come and write poetry at weddings, and that was a new one for me. And I see some people nodding their heads, but that was like, I was like, I clearly have not heard about all the varieties of vendor there are. But I love that's one of the things I love about the industry is that it's full of surprises and fun things that people are doing.
Oh yeah, like wedding content creators are taking off. There's always new adaptations and
Portrait
opportunities.
painters, I know those have been
Yeah,
around for a while, but it's still it's an amazing talent. I'm blown away every time I see. I can watch reels of their work for like hours at a time, and I'm just
the
like,
same here. They're my favorite
yeah,
ones to watch because
yeah,
I am terrible at painting.
yeah,
I
yeah.
enjoy it, but I'm terrible at it.
You should see my explore page. It's like wedding painters and cake decorators. Like that's my like happy hour relaxing hobby.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to be. I get that.
Yeah,
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing all of this. This is
my
so
pleasure. It
super
was wonderful to
helpful.
be here. Thank you all
And
for the great questions, and I look forward to chatting with any of you on Instagram or elsewhere. Just drop me a line.
fantastic. And if you guys want to refer back to this, I will be sending out the recording soon. So watch your email for that. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye for now.